Picture this. The sun has barely climbed above the horizon. A small group of ancient humans emerges from a cave after a violent storm. Smoke still drifts from last night's fire. Mud clings to their legs. Blood stains one hunter's hands after dressing fresh meat. Nearby, children splash through a shallow stream while insects swarm around scraps left behind. To us, the solution seems obvious. Wash your hands, clean yourself, stay healthy. But nobody had taught these people what bacteria were. They couldn't see germs. They had no microscopes, no chemistry, and no medical textbooks. So why, thousands of years before modern science, do archaeologists keep finding evidence that ancient people deliberately mixed strange materials with water and rubbed them across their skin? At first, it seems like a simple question. When did humans start using soap? Yet the deeper researchers dig, the stranger the story becomes. The earliest clues don't come from luxurious bathhouses or sophisticated civilizations. They appear in places where survival itself was uncertain, where every drop of fat, every handful of ash, and every piece of precious oil had another use. That creates an even bigger mystery. Why would people struggling to stay alive spend valuable resources on something that looked completely unnecessary? Were they trying to remove dirt, hide their scent from dangerous animals, heal mysterious skin diseases, or was the first soap never meant for bathing at all? The answer doesn't begin in a bathroom. It begins with fire, cooking, sacrifice, and an accidental discovery that may have changed human civilization long before anyone realized what they had created. The most obvious explanation is surprisingly simple. Ancient humans probably began using soap because they hated being dirty. After long days of hunting, butchering animals, gathering plants, and sitting beside smoky fires, their skin would have been coated with grease, soot, dried blood, and dust. Even without understanding germs, they could feel the difference between clean skin and filthy skin. Comfort alone could have been enough to encourage washing. Archaeologists have uncovered early evidence that supports this idea. Some of the oldest written records from Mesopotamia, dating back nearly 5,000 years, describe mixtures of oils, animal fats, and wood ash. These ingredients react together to form a primitive soap-like substance. At first glance, the mystery seems solved. People discovered a useful cleaning mixture and continued using it because it worked. Other civilizations appear to tell the same story. Ancient Egyptians combined mineral salts with oils for washing and treating the skin. Centuries later, Greek and Roman societies developed public bathing traditions where cleanliness became part of daily life. Across different cultures, the pattern repeats itself. Humans kept experimenting with substances that could remove grease better than water alone. That sounds convincing. After all, anyone who has tried washing oily hands with only water knows how ineffective it is. Add a soap-like mixture, and suddenly the grease disappears. The improvement is impossible to ignore. But then researchers noticed something that didn't fit this neat explanation. The earliest recipes weren't always stored with bathing tools. Many were recorded alongside instructions for processing wool, preparing textiles, performing rituals, or treating illnesses. Some of these mixtures may never have touched human skin at all. If that's true, then the first soap wasn't invented for cleanliness. It was created for an entirely different reason, and that changes the story completely. Most people imagine that soap followed a predictable path. First came dirty hands, then came the desire to get clean. Finally, someone invented soap. It feels logical, almost inevitable, but history has a habit of ignoring our expectations. One clue comes from the earliest civilizations of Mesopotamia. Clay tablets describe mixtures made from animal fat and ash, yet many of these records are connected to workshops rather than homes. Craftsmen needed to clean raw wool before weaving it into cloth. Oils and grease trapped inside the fibers had to be removed, and simple water wasn't enough. The strange mixture worked remarkably well. That discovery seems to explain everything, until another piece of evidence appears. As archaeologists compared ancient records from different cultures, they noticed that similar mixtures kept appearing in completely different settings. In Egypt, cleansing compounds were linked not only to bathing but also to medicine. Some recipes were applied to skin conditions and wounds. Others were connected to religious rituals, where priests carefully purified themselves before entering sacred spaces. Suddenly, soap wasn't just a cleaning product. It was a tool with multiple lives. Then came an even stranger observation. Many hunter-gatherer societies, separated by vast distances and thousands of years, developed their own ways of mixing ash with animal fats or plant oils. They couldn't have shared instruction manuals. Yet they kept arriving at surprisingly similar solutions. Was this simply coincidence? Or were humans repeatedly stumbling across the same chemical reaction without understanding why it worked? If so, the real invention may not have happened in a single place or at a single moment. It may have been rediscovered again and again whenever fire, fat, and ash came together. And that raises an even bigger question. If people weren't searching for soap in the first place, what unexpected accident kept leading them back to the same remarkable discovery? That question eventually led researchers to one of the oldest cities ever built. In the ruins of ancient Babylon, archaeologists uncovered clay containers coated with a mysterious residue. At first, they looked unremarkable, just ordinary pots buried for thousands of years. But what was stuck to their inner walls told a very different story. Scientists carefully analyzed the residue, expecting to find traces of food or cooking oils. Instead, the chemical signatures pointed towards something unexpected. The containers had once held a mixture of fats and alkaline substances, remarkably similar to primitive soap. Even more surprising, nearby cuneiform tablets described boiling these ingredients together instead of simply mixing them by chance. That discovery changed the timeline completely. It suggested that by around 2800 BCE, some people weren't accidentally creating soap anymore. They were intentionally making it. Someone had observed that heating fat with ash produced a substance unlike either ingredient alone. They didn't know the word saponification, and they certainly didn't understand chemistry. But they knew the process worked well enough to repeat it. Think about how incredible that is. Thousands of years before laboratories existed, ancient craftspeople were following what was essentially a chemical recipe based entirely on observation and experience. Every successful batch became another clue passed from one generation to the next. But the investigation uncovered another surprise. The earliest written instructions barely mention bathing. Instead, they focus on cleaning materials, preparing fibers, and specialized tasks. Human hygiene appears almost secondary. That creates a fascinating puzzle. If these ancient people had already learned how to make an effective cleaning agent, why wasn't personal washing the main priority? What was so valuable about this strange invention that its first purpose may have had almost nothing to do with the human body? To understand why soap mattered, it helps to follow the story of one civilization that depended on it more than almost anyone else. The ancient Egyptians. Imagine a young apprentice serving inside a temple along the Nile over 3,000 years ago. Every morning began the same way. Before touching sacred objects or entering the inner chambers, he watched senior priests carefully wash themselves using mixtures of oils, mineral salts, and alkaline compounds. It wasn't simply about looking clean. They believed purification separated the ordinary world from the sacred one. At first, the apprentice probably accepted the ritual without question. But over the years, he began noticing something curious. The same ingredients used during temple ceremonies also appeared in the hands of healers. Ancient medical papyri describe cleansing mixtures applied to infected wounds and irritated skin. The line between medicine, religion, and hygiene seemed almost invisible. Why? To the Egyptians, disease wasn't always seen as a purely physical problem. It could be spiritual, environmental, or both. Keeping the body clean wasn't just a matter of comfort. It was part of protecting life itself. Even if they couldn't explain bacteria, generations of observation had taught them that certain cleansing practices often led to better outcomes. That's what makes their story so fascinating. They weren't following modern science, yet experience kept guiding them towards surprisingly effective habits. But here's the twist. The Egyptians weren't alone. Across deserts, forests, and distant river valleys, completely different cultures were reaching similar conclusions without ever meeting one another. Somehow, people separated by continents were all discovering that combinations of ash, oils, and fats possessed unusual powers. The question was no longer who invented soap. It was why humanity kept rediscovering it, as though the secret had been hidden inside fire itself, waiting for anyone curious enough to notice. By now, the story has grown far beyond a single invention. It isn't really about soap anymore. It's about a pattern that seems to follow humans wherever they go. Travel thousands of miles from Mesopotamia, and similar ideas begin appearing again. Egyptian healers used cleansing mixtures in medicine. Celtic communities are believed to have experimented with animal fats and ash. Across Asia, plant oils and natural alkaline minerals became part of traditional washing practices. These societies spoke different languages, worshipped different gods, and never shared the same textbooks. Yet somehow, they kept arriving at remarkably similar solutions. That isn't the only pattern. Look beyond humans, and nature tells us a surprisingly familiar story. Birds have been seen dust bathing to remove parasites. Elephants throw mud over their bodies before rinsing it away. Some primates deliberately rub aromatic leaves onto their fur, reducing insects and irritating pests. None of these animals understand chemistry. They simply repeat behaviors that improve their chances of survival. Early, humans may have done exactly the same. Generation after generation, people noticed that ash removed grease better than water. Certain plants soothed itchy skin. Oils mixed with alkaline substances cleaned stubborn stains. Nobody knew why these tricks worked. They only knew they worked. The successful habits survived, while the ineffective ones quietly disappeared. Think about that for a second. Long before anyone discovered bacteria, molecules, or chemical reactions, humanity was already running one enormous experiment. Every campfire became a laboratory. Every meal produced fat and ash. Every generation tested, copied, and refined discoveries without ever writing down the science behind them. And that's when the mystery becomes much bigger than soap itself. If our ancestors could repeatedly uncover complex chemical solutions simply by observing the world, how many other accidental discoveries shaped civilization centuries, or even millennia, before anyone understood what they had actually found? Of course, history is never as neat as it first appears. If soap was such a remarkable discovery, why didn't every civilization embrace it in the same way? One surprising exception comes from communities that lived in extremely cold climates. Frequent washing could strip away protective oils from the skin, making people more vulnerable to freezing temperatures and harsh winds. Instead of washing with soap-like mixtures, many relied on animal fats to create a barrier against the cold. What seemed unhealthy by modern standards was actually a practical survival strategy. Then there were societies where water itself was the problem. In arid deserts, every drop was precious. Using large amounts of water for bathing simply wasn't realistic. Cleansing rituals became symbolic or focused on the hands, face, and other exposed areas rather than the entire body. Survival dictated different priorities. Even in civilizations famous for cleanliness, soap wasn't always the star. The ancient Greeks often cleaned themselves by rubbing olive oil over their skin and scraping it away with a curved metal tool called a strigil. It removed dirt and sweat remarkably well without relying on soap at all. The Romans adopted a similar practice before soap became more common in later periods. These exceptions reveal something important. Ancient people weren't chasing a universal definition of cleanliness. They were solving local problems with the resources available to them. So the real story isn't that soap conquered the ancient world. It's that humanity kept inventing different paths toward the same goal, staying healthy, comfortable, and alive. And that realization prepares us for the final twist. Because the greatest impact of soap had almost nothing to do with what ancient people believed it was doing. So, when did ancient humans start using soap? In one sense, the answer is around 5,000 years ago, when Mesopotamian records describe people intentionally making soap-like mixtures from fats and ash. But that's only the historical date. It isn't the real answer. The deeper answer is that soap was never truly invented in the way we imagine. It emerged from thousands of years of observation. Every campfire produced ash. Every successful hunt produced fat. Every generation experimented, failed, and tried again. Somewhere along that endless chain of trial and error, someone noticed that when these ordinary materials were heated together, something extraordinary happened. Grease vanished. Wool became easier to clean. Certain skin problems improved. Wounds often stayed healthier. Without realizing it, they had uncovered one of the most important chemical reactions in human history. Here's the astonishing part. Ancient people believed they were removing dirt, preparing cloth, performing sacred rituals, or treating visible illnesses. They had no concept of bacteria, viruses, or microscopic life. Yet many of their actions accidentally disrupted the very organisms that would not be discovered for thousands of years. They were winning battles against invisible enemies they didn't even know existed. Think about that. Long before Louis Pasteur explained germs, before microscopes revealed entire hidden worlds, before chemistry gave names to molecules, humanity had already learned a practical truth through experience alone. Certain mixtures made people, tools, fabrics, and living spaces cleaner in ways that improved survival, even if nobody understood the reason. That's why soap became far more than a cleaning product. It represents one of humanity's oldest superpowers, the ability to discover truths long before understanding them. Our ancestors didn't wait for perfect knowledge. They watched, remembered, adapted, and passed successful ideas from one generation to the next. Civilization wasn't built only by great inventions. It was built by countless small observations that quietly accumulated until they transformed the world. In the end, the story of soap isn't about cleanliness at all. It's about a species that kept solving mysteries centuries before it even realized what the questions were.